Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, all about getting your payroll done. My name's Calvin, and I will be one of your hosts today, but I am joined by Duncan, who will be taking over presentation duties very shortly to take you through the presentation. Just before we get started, however, I do want to run through just a little bit of housekeeping with you all, if that's all right. So for those of you who've been to a webinar with us already, this should hopefully just be a little bit of a refresher for you. But for those of you who are new to webinars, and this is your first session, we do use GoToWebinar's webcast feature, which is why you'll be watching in a web browser today. And on the right-hand side, you will see there are a few icons. Now, just a quick explanation of which icon does what. The top icon, which is a microphone, it's in red and it's crossed out. This is muted and it's muted automatically, which just means if you do have a microphone, either as part of your headset or headphones, or built into your laptop or computer that you're using, it's muted, can't be changed. That just means if you're having any conversations with either colleagues in the office or if you're working from home, any family members, and none of that will be heard by anyone within the session. So feel free to have any conversations you like. You don't need to sit there in silence. The next icon down looks like a question mark and a little speech bubble there. Now, when you click on this, you'll be able to ask a question to the team by typing in that white box and hitting the blue send button. Your question then appears in the right-hand side in a bigger speech bubble in the gray area with the answer appearing underneath. Now, we do use the reply to all feature, so do keep an eye out for other questions and answers coming through. But unfortunately, as it is a webcast, there is no ability to download the Q&A at the end of the session today, so we do apologize for that. However, if you'd like to save that, what we do advise is when we get to the end, copy and paste and pop that into a Word document, and that allows you to save it for later. Now, speaking of saving things for later, we do move on nicely. It brings me on to the next icon down, which is a little piece of paper there, which has a folded corner. If you click on this, there is a handout to download. Now, there are two versions available. The first version is a nice digital version with all the colors and the clickable links. There is also a more printer-friendly version, which is in black and white, which doesn't use up as much of your printer ink. So if you wish to print one, there is a more printer-friendly available version. And lastly, if you'd like to switch the presentation to full screen, you can do so by clicking on those 4 arrows at the bottom, which will expand the page into the full screen on your monitor. Careful not to hit the exit button though, we don't want to lose you too soon, but if you do click that by accident, don't worry, you can simply rejoin the webinar. Okay, so that's the housekeeping done. So it is now time for me to bring Duncan in, who's going to take us through what we'll be going through in the session today. So it's over to you now, Duncan.
Thank you very much, Calvin, and welcome to the webinar, everyone. So this session is all about getting your payroll done, so processing your payroll, and we've split it into 3 sections. So we're going to start by briefly going through a preparation checklist, covering some steps you need to take before you come to process your payroll. And then the main demo today will be actually processing your payroll, including entering your employees' payments, producing pay slips, and submitting your information to HMRC. Once we've been through that full end-to-end process, I'll take you through some month-end tasks, including the P32 report, and where required, the employer payment summary. And we'll then hand back to Calvin, who's going to run us through some further support as we take the remainder of the time in the webinar to continue answering your questions. So let's get things started with preparing to process a payroll. And for this section, I'm going to take you through a quick checklist of things you need to do before you sit down to enter the current period's wages. So just the 4 steps in this checklist, and if you are downloading the handout, all of the links that you see on screen will take you to our detailed guidance on the Sage Help Center. So first step would be to add any new starters that have joined you since the last time you ran a payroll. So use their starter form, either a P45 or starter checklist to get all their details set up in payroll. Second step would be record any absences that would qualify for statutory payments. So we're talking sickness, maternity, paternity, or adoption being the main ones. Step 3 is to put any employees who are not being paid on hold. And we're referring to employees that don't necessarily work all year round, they're taking some unpaid leave, or they're a seasonal worker. And by placing them on hold, it excludes them from the pay run, and it allows you to include them in an FPS as an irregularly paid employee. And you can read more about on-hold employees by following that link. And the fourth step is to check for any new tax code or student loan notices. And if you receive them online, you'll be able to use the built-in secure mailbox in Sage 50 Payroll in order to check for any new notices. And if you've received any, you can apply those changes directly to the relevant employee. So on the handout, we do have a link to the starter checklist, which replaced the old P46 form. And we covered the information about new starters earlier in the week, if you joined us for that webinar. So you'll be able to catch up with that with a recording when that is made available. So with the preparation out of the way, it's then time to move on to actually process your payroll. And that'll be the focus really of today's webinar. And what I've tried to do to simplify this process, particularly for any new users, is I've broken it down into 5 key steps. So those 5 steps start with setting your process date, which determines the tax periods for calculations of tax and national insurance, and also the payment date submitted in your full payment submission that you'll be sending to HMRC. You would then move on to enter your employees' payments and, where required, any deduction information. You'll then produce pay slips and reports. And we're going to mention a few different ways of creating pay slips in Sage 50 Payroll. You would update the records, which will finalize the payroll and create the historical entry for that pay period. And the final step is to submit that all to HMRC as part of your full payment submission. So to get things started, we're going to set our process date. And at this point, we're going to bring the slideshow down and we're going to jump into the demo. Now, before I get started, just a bit of navigation. Most of the tasks we'll be using today are found from the payroll tasks. So I've selected payroll in the bottom left corner, and I would be able to work through these tasks from top to bottom. But another way to complete your payroll is to follow the process map. So you'll see in the top right-hand corner, there is an option to change view. And if I click onto change view, you can set this to payroll process. You can resize these screens to suit your needs. And then you can, if you wish, follow the steps running from left to right. Now, obviously, there's a lot more than the 5 tasks that I've just mentioned involved in running a payroll. And what I will try to do is to mention some of the other tasks that fit in and around that main payroll process. So first thing we're going to do is to set our process date. So when I logged into payroll, I just left it set to today's date, but we need to set it to the date that the employees receive their pay, which in my example is always the last day of the calendar month. So I can either click it from the process map or the payroll tasks, but when I select change process date, I can then choose my employee's pay date. So in this case, it's the 30th of September, which does happen to land on a non-banking day. But as per HMRC guidelines, even if the employee gets paid on the previous Friday, we still report the regular pay date, in this case, the last day of the calendar month in our payroll submission. So it's the date they receive the money, unless that happens to fall on a non-banking day, in which case you report the regular pay date. So as you can see, that's tax month 6 in this particular example. And if I click OK, that has then saved the pay date, and it is then visible at the bottom of the screen on the status bar in the bottom right-hand corner. Now, next up, I'm going to select the employees that I want to pay. And before I did this, I've already set up a new employee and I've recorded some absence details. So we'll start to see what that looks like in the enter payment screen in just a few moments. But to select the employees I'm paying, I can either run through and click on them individually, or a quicker way to do it, if I want to highlight everyone, is to click clear and then swap. And then we have all of our employees then selected. So I'm running a pretty straightforward payroll. All of the employees are paid monthly. If you do have a payroll which consists of different pay frequencies, what you could do is you could use the outline structure just here in order to select the specific pay frequency that you want to process. And that way you'll see all of the monthly paid employees in one view. And if I had any weekly paid employees, I could switch to them like so. But I don't need to do that. I'm just going to stick with all employees because all of mine are paid monthly. So now that we've got everyone selected, I'm going to go ahead and enter the employee's pay. So we're going to skip ahead to the enter payment step, which is just here in the payroll tasks. And you'll also find it here in the process map. We'll see a prompt asking if we want to check for updates to current legislation. So I'm going to do a quick check by clicking yes, and we get confirmation that there are no new legislation updates found. And that then takes us into the enter payment screen, displaying the payment information for the first employee selected. Now, by default, the values that you see here will be the same values that were processed in the previous pay run, but there is a reset payments wizard that you can run prior to entering the payments, which does allow you to set payments back to default values or clear specific payments down to 0. So that might be quite useful if you run more of a variable payroll, but in my example, a lot of the values stay the same from period to period. So as you can see here, I've landed on the payments tab where we can see the pay elements that are assigned to this particular employee. They get a fixed salary for the month. If they worked any overtime, I would enter the number of hours worked. And this little multiplier here just tells me that the overtime payment is a factored payment. So it's actually linked to the salary and the contracted hours to work out the hourly rate. And in this case, there might be a bonus. Then we're going to enter like so. And that starts to build up the gross pay figure that you see at the bottom of the screen here. And you can see deductions such as tax, national insurance, and then the employee's net pay. Now, other elements of pay can be found by navigating the tabs at the top. So if there are any voluntary deductions, subscriptions, for example, that you might deduct from your employee, they will be shown here. You've then got attachment of earnings orders. You've got company loan repayments, if you're deducting a company loan through payroll. And then you've got SSP and parental leave, which just gives you an area to check these payments and also to quickly update absence dates for either statutory sick pay or shared parental pay. The next tab is a summary of payments and deductions, and this is where you'll find any statutory payments based on absence information that you've entered. And in this case, we've got a pension deduction, we've got our tax and national insurance, taking us down to the net pay, and then we've got some information about all the calculations of the various items and an area where we can keep notes should we wish to. So pretty simple to navigate. The payments and the summary tab, I would say, are the most important areas of enter payments. And a quick tip, if you are in the middle of a pay run and you need to access that employee's record, you don't have to close out of the pay run. You can just click this employee icon here at the top, and that will actually go straight into that employee's record. So you can check any information, make changes if required, and then when you close back, it takes you to where you were within the pay run. So to move on to my next employee, I'm going to click on to Save/Next. So this is the second employee in my list, and I would just repeat the same steps as before. So if there is a bonus, for example, we could type that in, could have a quick check of the summary, see the other deductions, and then we would repeat these steps working through our full payroll. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save the default payments for most of these employees. But as I move on to employee 4, if I just set the summary, you will notice that I have got a statutory payment being paid this period. So I've entered some maternity details, and this employee is actually starting their maternity leave in this month. Now, whenever there's a statutory payment, you usually need to make an adjustment to your employee's basic. And I just want to remind you, you'd have seen this if you came to our sickness and maternity session. There is a make-up basic option that can be used if you want to pay your employee's usual full pay, but then made up of the statutory payment and normal basic. And the way that make-up basic works, it's really simple. You start by entering the full amount you want your employee to receive, which in this case is the usual monthly salary, one at $20.47.50. And then on the summary tab, if I click Make-up Basic, I'll see a prompt asking if I want to adjust the value of salary. And if I click Yes to continue, it's automatically reduced it, leaving the employee with their total gross pay matching the rate of their usual salary, but it's made up now of salary and statutory pay. And with this being a parental payment, we'll be able to recover it, and we'll show you more about how that works towards the end of the webinar. So moving through the next couple of employees, I'm not going to make many changes at this point. Most of them are on fixed salaries. We would enter overtime values, etc. I do have some that are paid hourly. So this employee has an hourly rate, and I'm recording the number of hours that they've worked this period. So maybe they worked 52 hours this month. The next one, that's a number of hours. You'd make the changes as required. And actually for hourly payments, there is another way to quickly adjust the hours worked, which I will show you once we've been through this process. And that just brings me to my last employee, Mr. Employee 11, who's a new starter this period. And because their start date was after the start of the month, I will need to make a manual adjustment to this month's salary to reflect what I need to pay them for. So the default value for this employee's salary is that monthly amount. The way that I'm working it out is I'm going to look at the number of days I want to pay them for this month, which in September, when they started on September the 11th, is going to be 15 days. And I know that there are 21 working days in September. So if I go to the hours value, I can click on this small icon, which brings up a little calculator. And I'm just going to do 15 divided by 21, which will slightly reduce the salary for this employee to reflect what they've worked this month. And I can set that hours value back to 1, so they get a full month salary when I pay them next month. So just a consideration for new starters and also for leavers, if they're not working the full period, that you will need to make that sort of adjustment manually. Now, I have already assigned a pension scheme to this employee. So in this demo, I am not using the pensions module. So I won't be running a pension assessment. I'm doing all of that manually. And you can see the pension contribution, as well as the other deductions, are being taken off, leaving them with this month's net pay. So we're pretty happy with all those payments. I've saved them, and I'm going to click on to close, which takes me out of the enter payment screen. And if you look at the employee list, you'll see that the last calculated column is now displaying the September pay date, confirming that I have entered payments for that date. And we're ready to sort of move on now and start to look at what that information looks like on our payroll reports. Now, I'll just come back to those hourly paid employees. So I do have some that get an hourly rate for their basic pay, and I've also got some that receive hourly payments for overtime. And there is a timesheet entry option if you're working off timesheets, which allows you to enter a batch of hours in one screen. So if I go into timesheet entry, you'll actually see here, if I make it full screen, that I could, if it was easier, just enter the hours value for each of these employees working through this table. I could do that for both basic and overtime payments, which have been set up to be included in timesheet entry. And then that's just a quicker way of saving hours worked if you are running a more hourly payroll. So let's take a quick breather at that point and recap where we're up to in the process. So we set our process date, the date the employees receive their pay, or regular pay date if that happens to fall on a non-banking day. We then went into enter payments. Now, if required, you can run the reset payments wizard first. You could use timesheet entry to quickly enter hours worked. And once you've entered the payments, if you use our pensions module, at that point you run a pension assessment, which you will have seen if you came to yesterday's webinar on pensions and the pensions module. And a quick reminder of the key areas of the enter payment screen. So you navigate the different tabs to see the different pay elements. You would be inputting hours and rate values. You'll see the gross to net breakdown at the bottom of each screen. And when you're happy with the payments, it's save/next to move on to your next employee. And a bit of a top tip, if you do need to jump into an employee record in the middle of a pay run, click on employee and it will take you straight there. And then when you come out of that record, you haven't lost your place in the middle of your payroll. So we are now about halfway through the pay run. We've entered all of the payments and we're ready to put some of that information onto reports. So we will need to produce pay slips for our employees. And we're going to run through the different formats available. And we'd also strongly recommend that you run some reports for your own payroll records. Now, when it comes to pay slips, the three options in Sage 50 Payroll are to host your pay slips online in Sage HR online services, so your employees can access them via an internet browser or a mobile app. You can email pay slips as a secure attachment, either from Microsoft Outlook, or you can enter SMTP or webmail settings to send them via your webmail. Or you can go old school and you can print your pay slips, either on a payslip stationery or, if you prefer, onto plain paper. But if you're after stationery, it isn't available directly from Sage, but you can still get it from third-party sellers. So in the demo, I'm going to show you the online payslips option, but in the handout, click any of those links to read the guide on emailing or printing the payslips. The other thing we're going to take a look at are some recommended reports. So payment summary part 1 and 2 would be the two that we recommend as a minimum. And there is an option of putting together a report selection, which creates a report pack, which is really useful for employer reports, so you can keep everything together as a single PDF. So we'll try and have a quick look at that as well. So let's bring the slides down again and pick up where we left off. So we've entered the payments. We now need to go into our pre-update reports area. So that you'll find just underneath pension assessment. It's also available here in the process map. First thing you'll see are any favorites that you've added. So it's really simple to add a report to your favorites. Just need to click on the star next to the report name. So I've actually got a payslip layout. It's one of our standard laser payslips. And from the summary folder, I've picked out the payment summary part 1, landscape version, and payment summary part 2. So I'm going to run them from favorites. We'll start with some payslips. So if you are printing the payslips, you can preview them first. Now I have set up some of my employees to receive online payslips. So it does ask me if I want to include those employees in the printed version. So if you're doing a bit of mixing and matching, if you've got some employees with online and other employees with printed payslips, you could click no to this message and you would only get a printed payslip for people that are not set up for online. Or if you want a full set, maybe for your own records, you can click yes, which is what I'm going to do. And then you'll see the report preview on screen. So this is one that you can print out onto your payslip stationery. You can export it as a PDF and it will save an exact copy of what you're seeing on screen. And then if you needed to, you could open that PDF and print from there if you didn't have access to the program at the time. So we can see the payslips here for the employees with the various pay elements, the deductions, got an attachment of earnings. We've got some year-to-date values on there. And most importantly for the employee, the amount that they will receive as their net pay. So print option here, or if you want to save a PDF, use the export option at the top. The other ones for your records, payment summary 1 and 2. So a quick look at these for you. Payment summary part 1 gives you a breakdown gross to net for each employee, giving you report totals for your gross pay, your net pay, and all of the deductions in between. And then payment summary part 2 gives a bit more detail on the employer items. So we've got our employer NI contributions just here. We've got the employer pension. We've got all the tax codes and NI categories that we used at the time. So those two reports and payslips is what I would run as a minimum for your own records, payslips for your employees. And if you wanted to combine them into a single reports pack, you can set up what's known as a report selection. And you can find information on how to set that up from the handout. But if I just preview the one that I created earlier in true Blue Peter fashion, you'll see that it runs a number of reports at the same time. So I have here, if I just maximize it, a set of pay slips. I have a payment summary part 1 and 2. I've also tagged on a pensions report. So for this one, it is possible to export a single document just by clicking on the little drop down arrow next to export and choosing export all as a single document. And then I'm just going to drop this on my desktop and I'm going to call it September Payroll Reports. And what I then have is I have that single PDF reports pack, which would be ideal as my employer copy of the payroll reports. So those are some reports you can run, including report selections, but I really want to show you the online payslips option, which you get included with your payroll subscription. So we're actually running a webinar next week on getting started with Sage HR online services, if you want to know how to set this up. But once it's set up, you can get all of your payslips uploaded to the portal in just a few clicks, and then your employees have the convenience of accessing them from a mobile device or from any web browser. So you would do the upload online payslips option for this. I've just got 5 of my employees set up for this one. So what you'll see is it comes up with the details of those employees. Give that another click. Okay, doesn't seem to be playing ball for us this afternoon. Okay, so it looks like we're going to need to leave the online payslips for now. Apologies for the technical issue there. But as I say, we are covering it in a webinar next week if you did want to sign up and see how online payslips work. I can actually show you the online portal because I do have that ready and open. So from an employee's point of view, they would have a profile that looks something like this. They would have access to their payslips and P60s. So a list of all historical payslips that you might have uploaded. They can view the details on screen. So it looks a bit like this. They can save PDFs of the documents, and you can do something very similar for the P60s if they wanted to view those online as well. So online payslips available with all of our subscriptions. So that's payslips and reports. Let's have another quick recap of where we are up to. And if you are interested in learning more about report selections, follow the link there on the handout. So we're in the second half of the pay run now. We have entered the payments, we've run our payslips and reports, we've checked the information on those reports, and we're happy with it. So it is now time to update the records, which finalizes the pay run. It creates a historical entry for those payments. And then you've got optional tasks of posting the nominal link to accounts. And then if you have any leavers, once you've updated records for their final payment, you can run the leaver wizard. So let's rejoin the demo so that we can update the records. So we still have our employees selected, and if we want to, we can switch on the process map. Our next task is to update records. So we're going to click that from the payroll tasks. You'll get a quick reminder that if you need any pre-update reports, you'll need to print these before you update. But I've already done mine, so I'm going to click yes to continue. And then within the update records wizard, you're prompted to take your own backup of your payroll data, which I would strongly recommend, because at this point, you've done all the hard work, you've input the wages, you've checked the information's correct, and this gives you a restore point to come back to if you ever needed to in the future. But for this demo, I'm going to skip the backup and go straight on to the next option. It confirms that I'm updating monthly employees, and there are 11 employees within the list. I'll click next once more, and it'll show a list of the employees who will be updated. And then if I click on to finish, after a short delay, I get the confirmation message. The 11 employees have been updated, And I'm reminded that I need to use the lever wizard, if anyone's left, before I complete my full payment submission. So once I click OK to that message, you'll have a look at the last updated column, and you will see that that now contains my September pay date. So this is a handy way to check at a glance if you've updated your payroll and have indeed updated for that pay date. And if I take a look at the employee records, so looking at the history tab, we now have a historical entry for tax month 6. And the only way I'd be able to make changes to that pay run would be to either roll back or restore an earlier backup. So that is now read-only, it's historical data, and the submission that we'll be doing next will submit these values to HMRC. So just moving across on the process map so you can see what's coming up next. A nominal link allows you to post salary journals into accounts. You could process leavers at this point if anyone has left. We covered that on Tuesday in our Starters and Leavers webinar. So we're going to jump straight ahead to do our full payment submission. And this is how we report the payments and deductions to HMRC. Now you need to do this on or before the employee's pay date. That's your deadline for the submission. And if I click on this option, either from the process map or the payroll tasks, I'm seeing a warning, but that's only because I'm in a training room. You will not see this warning, so just disregard that for this demo. And what I am going to do, because I'm having a few technical issues there, is I'm just going to close and reopen. That will often fix problems of this nature. Just log it in with that same pay date. Okay, so back to full payment submission. And this time we have got the submission screen. So it's telling us that we're about to send our FPS to the government gateway. We would click continue, where it shows us the saved credentials for our user ID and password. So these are the details that you use to log in to PAYE online services, as well as your PAYE reference and accounts office reference. We then have a summary of the information we're about to submit. So this would include starter and leaver information where applicable. So we do have a new starter that will be included in this submission. And then if we're happy with everything, it's actually showing the liability. So this is the tax, national insurance and student loans that are associated with each employee. We can go ahead and submit. As soon as you click submit, you'll see a progress bar move across the screen. And once a submission has been made, you'll get this confirmation message. The submission of your data has been successful. So we can then click close. The last FPS date now matches our last updated date. So we can now see at a glance that we have completed our pay run and we have submitted that information to HMRC. And just to recap those final steps, submit to HMRC is sending your full payment submission. So within this, it will include any starter or leaver details, the employees that have been paid, their taxable payments, and the liability made up of any tax, NI, or student loan contributions. And the deadline to submit an FPS is on or before your employee's pay date. So that's our payroll done. But I want to briefly cover, for the next 5 minutes, some month-end tasks. So when we're talking month-end, we are talking tax months, which run between the 6th of the month and the 5th of the following month. And once you reach the end of the tax month, it's then time to run your P32 report, which will tell you how much you need to pay to HMRC. So that's the tax and the national insurance you've deducted, offset by anything that you're reclaiming. You may need to submit an employer payment summary, an EPS, if you have adjustments to your liability. We'll explain what that means in a moment. And you have a payment deadline of the 19th of the following month if you pay by check, or 22nd of the following month if you pay electronically, to make the payment due to HMRC. So for tax months, they do start on the 6th day of the month, as the tax year starts on the 6th of April, and they end on the 5th day of the following month. If you pay monthly, once you've completed your monthly pay date, you can go ahead and do month end. If you pay weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly, make sure that you have updated records for any pay date on or before the 5th of the following month before you do these steps. And if you want to download a handy tax calendar, there is a link to do that from our help centre on the handout. So what's a P32? Well, it's an employer liability report. Essentially, it tells you how much you need to pay to HMRC, broken down into the various elements. So it looks something like this, with the first 4 items representing the tax, student loans, and national insurance contributions deducted from employees, including the employer contribution, so it's the gross NI figure. And all of that information is what you've submitted to HMRC as part of your FPS. And then you have additional items, which are generally items you've reclaimed, such as employment allowance, statutory pay recovered, and also apprenticeship levy payments that are due to be paid if you're a larger business that's liable to pay that. Now, these adjustments require an EPS to be submitted. For employment allowance, you do that at the start of each tax year, and that covers you for the rest of the year. But for statutory payments, if you're recovering any during the month, you will need to submit a monthly EPS to report the value recovered. And then it calculates the amount to pay to HMRC at the bottom of that report. So as just mentioned, an EPS is required if any of those items apply. So the main one is recovering statutory pay. If you're in the construction industry scheme and your offset and CIS deductions suffered, that's reported an EPS. If you pay an apprenticeship levy, you have to report that monthly as well. Or if no one has worked at all during the month and you haven't sent any FPSs, you would send an EPS at the end of the month just to inform HMRC that there will be no payment due. And that all needs to be done by the 19th of the following month. So let's finish the demo by showing you those 2 steps. So I've completed my monthly payroll for tax month 6. I'm now ready to run the P32 report. A few different places you can run it from. If you're on the payroll tasks, there's actually a direct link just here to run a P32 report. But you'll also find it in your reports option. So if I click on P32 report from here, it's going to ask me to enter the criteria values. So I'm reporting on tax period 6 or tax month 6. That's what I've got set here. And then as you can see, this is my P32 report. So all of the tax, the national insurance. I've already claimed my employment allowance for the year, but I am recovering statutory maternity pay that I paid out this month. So that has slightly reduced the amount of payment I need to make compared to what I submitted in my FPS. And for that reason, I do need to send the EPS to HMRC. So this is how much I need to pay. And I have one further report to make because of the SMP. So a further submission, I should say. So employer payment summary is also one of the payroll links. So I've grouped some of the handy links together here. Alternatively, you can go to the e-submissions menu and you'll find employer payment summary from these tasks. You select the reason why you're sending it. So for me, it's an adjustment to my liability because I've recovered statutory pay. Work through the wizard where it will summarize the reclaim amounts for the tax year to date. You can manually enter CIS deductions if it applies to you. And if you're a larger business paying into the apprenticeship levy, this month's payment will be shown here, or the year-to-date payment, I should say, will be shown here. So we complete this wizard. Don't worry about that warning, you won't get that. But you would simply run through the EPS submission. And once that has been successful, the information in your online account will be updated and HMRC will know exactly how much you'll be paying them at the end of that month, or by the 19th or the 22nd deadline. So that is it for the month-end tasks. We have about 5 minutes of the allotted time remaining, but at this point, I'm going to hand you back to Calvin, and he's going to run you through some further support as we continue answering your questions in the chat. So back to you, Calvin.
Thank you so much, Duncan. Okay, so that wraps up pretty much the most of the presentation. However, I have just popped back to say a few things on the further support that you have available to you once the webinar's ended and throughout your Sage 50 payroll journey. Now, the first thing to mention is our Help Center. And if any of you are actually in your Sage 50 payroll program right this minute, I do recommend pressing F1 on your keyboard and just having a look at what happens there. But we have got our Help Center, which is sage.co.uk/help, or if you press F1, you do get a mini version. If you haven't already, you get a mini version of the Help Center within the product itself, which is wonderful. And in this, you can search the knowledge base. So if you have any questions once the session has come to a close, I know is often the case, especially with myself, that questions do tend to come a little bit too late after the moment's passed. If that happens, pop over to the Help Center, press F1 and type the question in the search bar, and you can have a look through our knowledge base guides where there is a full library of guides there for you. There's also videos to watch within those guides and in the search bar. So the other thing is support guides, which you can see in the screenshot. So we have things from processing your payroll, which Duncan's taking you through today, to legislation, to online services. So a few questions there about the Sage HR online services. So you can find support guides via that as well. We also have our webinars available through this. So you can see webinars in the top right. So we are doing a multitude of webinars for this week, which I'll get to in a little bit, but we do run them weekly regardless. So do join us for any sessions that may be of interest to you each week. And lastly, if you do need to speak to our support team, you can contact these through our get in touch options, again, via our Help Center or by pressing F1 on your keyboard. The next thing, or the last thing as well, is our Sage University platform, which is free to register. And in here, you can access a full library of e-learning, some Sage certifications, and some bite-sized learning available as well. We are running a badge for the series of webinars we run this week, and you can even find out more about badging or earn some more badges via Sage University as well. So please do check that out if you can. The best part about this is any courses that you find that interest you in Sage University, you can do at your own time and in your own pace as well, which is wonderful to do, because I know time is certainly of the essence in the world of payroll. I did mention what's been going on this week. So we have been running a special week because it is National Payroll Week. So happy National Payroll Week to you all, of course. And if you have attended 3 out of 5 of our live webinars this week, this is number 4, then you will achieve our Sage 50 Payroll National Payroll Week 2023 Processing Proficiency Badge. And those will be sent to any eligible attendees from next week. So if you have attended 3 out of 5, then you can join us. You will receive that badge, which you can print out or put on your social media or even pop on your email signature. It's up to you how you wish to use it, but it is a good achievement. We do have one left, which is for Payroll Week, and that is tomorrow at 11 o'clock, which is our Big Sage Payroll Quiz, which I personally am quite excited about, and I would love to see as many people join us for this as well. It is a bit of fun, but it will also be educational, where we'll be asking you guys some questions based on what we've covered this week in those 4 subjects, and we will be then revealing the answers with a little bit of a demo as well. So it will both be engaging, as I mentioned, a bit of fun, but we'll also be learning a few things as well. So I do hope as many of you can join us for that quiz tomorrow. Now, there is no prizes, it is all just for fun. However, if you are joining with a colleague, perhaps you could have a little bit of mini competition between you all. But as I said, it is just a bit of fun, so there's no actual prizes for it, unfortunately. So that's National Payroll Week 2023 and what we have running in terms of webinars. So that is it for the remaining minutes of the session. We will stick around a little bit longer. I am aware we are at the end, but we'll stick around just a little bit longer to make sure as many questions are answered as possible. I have seen there has been quite a few coming through, and there is quite a busy session, so apologies if you experienced any delays in getting your answer. We were working through them as quickly as we possibly can, and we will remain doing that for a few more minutes at the end of the session. If you are leaving us at this point, it's been an absolute pleasure again to see so many people attend the session today. I hope you've enjoyed it and hopefully learned a few things or two. You will be directed to a short feedback survey as well when you come to leave the session or the session comes to a close. It does mean quite a lot to both myself and Duncan if you do spend those few valuable minutes just filling those in for us. We can't make improvements and we certainly can't try new things out without that feedback from you guys. So we do appreciate it, and we are aware it can sound a bit like a broken record when we're asking for feedback. You probably get it from every company, but do know that we do read it quite religiously to try and make as many changes or keep doing the things that you love, of course, and make sure these are as engaging and as informative as possible. So thank you in advance. I'm going to jump on mute now, help the guys out with the questions again, and I will be back when we either run out of time or we have answered all of our questions. So thank you once more, and we'll see you soon. Okay, everyone, so I can see that we are coming to the very end of the session and the last questions are being currently answered whilst I talk. So I thought I will pop on now just to say our final goodbyes for today's session. I do hope you can all join us for tomorrow's quiz. As I mentioned, it should be quite an enjoyable session to get a bit of engagement from you guys as well as showing off a few demos. So that's it from us, both myself and Duncan. I hope you all are all having a lovely time, of course, and staying safe out there as well. And hopefully we shall see you in a webinar soon. So that's all from us. So thank you once again for attending, and we'll hopefully see you in the next one. Thanks again.